This week on the Jochum Strength podcast, we had the chance to talk to my boss and longtime firefighter strength and conditioning coach, Vanessa Frost. Vanessa started as a collegiate strength coach, working with multiple teams, and has now been working with firefighters for nearly a decade. Throughout the episode, she talks about the qualities she looks for in an assistant coach, the importance of being able to relate to the people you're training, and the intricacies of working with firefighters instead of purely athletes. If you have any interest in working within the tactical athlete space, this is one to pay attention to. It should be noted that these are the opinions of Vanessa and not necessarily her employer. As always, thanks for listening and enjoy the episode.
Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Jochum Strength Insider. The Jochum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Jochum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with a Jochum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program. Boom.
This is the Jochum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm super pumped to be here.
Yeah, so Tristan, you have a connection here. What's your connection?
This is the boss on
The
the other
boss.
side right now. Yeah.
this has got to be the first boss on the podcast. That's pretty badass.
Oh yeah.
This is head coach right now.
Head coach. So how did you guys originally get connected? What was the whole meeting like? What was that?
Mine was I was giving a presentation in grad school and someone said, this job looks like something you just described. And they sent me a random link to Pflugerville, Texas strength job. And the first thing I did was went onto Google Maps and typed in, please don't be like a town of 1,000 people in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, okay, this looks like pretty promising. I'll just, I was in that phase of sending out thousands of applications at that time and sent one out, heard back, and flew down a few times for some interviews and ended up down here.
And Vanessa, what was your first impression of Tristan?
Okay. So I'm remembering back to his video. He did one of the requirements for hiring was a like 3 or 5 minute video, something like that, kind of introducing themselves and their background and their thoughts and processes. And he had the most buttoned up video where he recorded himself giving essentially a presentation of himself with like all his lovely pictures and his accolades and things like that. And I was like, all right, this dude's buttoned up. And another thing was also a written assignment, which actually he didn't do the right one. And I was like, oh, okay. So he's buttoned up, but also not quite so. And so like that means we could actually hang. Like, let's get all the important stuff done. And then like if some stuff falls over by the wayside, like we'll figure it out in the end. So he seemed like a real person, which was fun. And then had him down. And yeah, we interviewed him. He crushed it. And then had him we had all of our candidates essentially run a workout with a crew that was kind of like a hodgepodge of people.
And this was before they were hired.
Before they were hired.
Oh,
yeah.
That's cool.
So like
Tristan,
it was like
that.
yeah, it was there's probably like 4 steps or so into getting hired. So we had a hodgepodge of people to run a workout for, and all I told him was like, hey, you are going to get a group of firefighters. These ones in particular won't be on shift, so that you won't be interrupted, but I do want you to train them as if they are on shift. And then I gave him a list of like equipment, essentially of what we have. And so he came in and did that, and the crew liked him in terms of his energy, and I just sat there and watched him coach essentially. Yeah. And you've been here, what, 5 months now?
Yeah,
Six?
5, 6 months. It
Five,
was
6 months.
honestly pretty intimidating because you came in and there was just three people with clipboards like watching you lead a workout. But then plus there was other firefighters like just going about their life, like actually doing their job, wondering like what's going on here. So you just like had a peanut gallery of people watching you, and it was definitely different.
That's pretty sweet. And I'm gonna keep going on this tangent because we do have a lot of young coaches that listen to the podcast that go through that interview process that Tristan went through. Vanessa, when you're like looking at all those stuff, like was it really something when he was coaching, the energy was good? It was just like the relatability. Like what is something that you can like give the young coaches when they're looking? Because how many applicants do you think you got for this job?
Um, I'm trying to think. Somebody asked me that the other day. So I looked over 16 of them, and that's because those are the only ones that got to me.
Yes.
Meaning that I informed HR, like, hey, if they can't, upload X, Y, Z, or if you have to like handhold them through this entire process, like I don't push them towards me. I think we had somewhere close to 50 applications or so. It's a contract position, so not a full-time position with benefits and things like that. So I expected a lower number. And so yeah, that's how we ended. And so I looked over 16 of them. We had three of them finally go through the process that I just told you about in terms of like running a crew and or running a workout with a crew and things like that. And so what I looked for most is a coach's ability to engage a group they've never interacted with. And so, how well do they know how to read a room and quickly adjust maybe what their intention was? Because, like, a lot of people, especially when we're talking about they work with firefighters, they walk in and they have a preconceived notion of who they're working with in their mind. And but many times, and really regardless of what population you're talking about, that's coaching, right? You walk in, you think you're going to get one thing, and maybe they got trashed the next day from a practice, or in our case, like they had a ton of calls or whatever, and you're getting an entirely different vibe. Can you read the vibe of a room and act accordingly? Do you know how to, walk the balance between being like, I don't want to say like uptight professional, but like truly professional in the like almost too much sense, and also walk the line of like poking fun at people you just met, but knowing how to read them where is that line, especially when we're talking about firefighters. They're a very particular group in that you are not in until they've allowed you in, like many other groups. But um, that's the most unsuccinct way of how I can say what I was looking for.
No, that's super cool because like in our age of information, it seems like all of the mentorships and the like what people are searching for is these like textbook answers and these
Mhm.
like equations and these systems, which are all great. But it's like if you don't have the people skills, man, it's like as
Yeah.
so many coaches, so many interns that I've had, it's like yeah, they look for like, okay, what about this? What about the sets? It's like, okay, you have to go be able to talk to these people. Like, if you can't talk to
Hmm.
them, none of this, unless you're just going to be like only online coach and like text them the whole time. Like, but like
Yeah.
99% of coaches, you have to go be able to relate to people and talk to people, especially in the firefighting setting where you talk about you have culture. I'm sure it's very much like a team where it's like you have to fit in with the culture that is there. And then you also have people that are like, this is like a life or death type environment too. You know what I mean? Like it's not like I'm trying to think of it in a setting of like you're not messing around with them, but you can't. They're also people, and you like they have families and lives, and you can't be the like the nerd the entire time. You know what I mean? Like you have
Hmm.
to be able to relate with the bros and the girls and like have that conversation with them. And I just feel like that's not talked enough about. And so many interns that I get, it's like all of their questions. I'm like, our questions are in the wrong space, man. We're like, we can go read all that stuff right before bed. Let's focus on the stuff that we need to work on here with the people in front of us.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and it's fair in that, like, if you're an intern, you're at the very beginning of your career, you are trying to learn, like, as people say, the X's and O's of like, what is it that I'm supposed to do, of like exercise selection or all these sorts of things. Like, there's a point at which that's where your focus should be and you should be learning. But especially if you have the opportunity to learn from somebody, like, your job, like you said, is to go learn that on your own. And then you can use whoever your reference is, the person you're working with, to kind of cross check that. Like, hey, I read this. Here's what I think. What are your thoughts on this? Or how do you approach X, Y, and Z? So that way you can learn nuance, because that's what a good coach needs, because you are never going to get the exact same person in the exact same scenario who needs the exact same thing. And like you said, the ability to read the room it's not a lost art, because people know how to do it, but it's something that I don't think people outwardly seek to learn. They kind of just either happen chance upon it because, they have been put through XYZ experience in their life. Or they've been around long enough that they've had to learn how to work with people at some point. But if you have the opportunity, especially like if you have interns and if you are an intern, things like that, that means you have the opportunity to work with people, literally learn how to like try talking to them. If you don't have the opportunity to work with people, talk to strangers. Like, if you can carry on a conversation with a stranger, even if they are throwing you the middle finger and don't want to interact with pleasantries, guess what? That happens to me at work. People don't want to talk to me. Sometimes when you like show up and want to talk about health and fitness and eat your vegetables and do a fucking squat. And so like, that's going to teach you something too.
And so when you got this job, did you start off as a head coach? Was it like a process? Did you start the department of like the fitness department, the strength conditioning department for the firefighters? Was there already something well established? Like, what was your journey like to get into this role?
Yeah, so I've been here for almost 10 years now. There was nobody who held my position before. So the position was created and I'm the first to have held it. However, they were doing things prior to me being here. And so about like a year and a half before I'd been here, they had a contractor come in. So somebody who worked at a local gym would come in and try and run workouts and things like that. And then prior to that, they had essentially a committee of firefighters who were interested in, job tasks with the concept of health and fitness. And so I was hired in 2016. Back in 2011 is kind of when they started that journey of like, hey, what does this need to look like? And so they started implementing a few assessments at that point. And then I am the first to come in and hold the like formalized position, although they did have a contractor for something like 6 months to a year, a little bit before I had been in there.
And what were those first couple days like, or the first couple years like, where you're trying to like build up the culture, you're trying to get people to buy into this, maybe
Mm,
something new, like, hey, this is an actual thing that we're doing now. Like, I'm actually hired
yeah.
by the fire department. It's not some outside contractor coming in. Like, what was that process like?
Um, it was interesting. And so like before this, before I worked with firefighters, I was an interim head for a collegiate program. And so I was moving from, working with high level athletes and learning, honestly, for the first time, how to deal with micropolitics from like a coaching standpoint. Like, I was no longer an assistant. I was a head strength and conditioning coach, having to, navigate the world of athletic coaches on my own to a degree at 25, which was terrifying. Um, and so I came from a lot of peopling, and I grew up on a military base. So, like, obviously not the same as firefighters, but similar in the sense of like population base and kind of like how to handle yourself in a conversation type of way. And so it was honestly awesome. I didn't have the same challenges that many people who walk into fire do, in the sense that there was some work done on health and fitness before me. And so the concept itself wasn't brand new. There wasn't a ton of maybe like overall pushback. And what also helped me was the contractor they had before me, in their words, not mine, because I don't know who this person was, but like that person broke a lot of people based on their coaching methodology, based on the workouts that person had written for the department and had the people do. I had one of our firefighters tell me that person broke more people in 6 months than than the Marines did when I was active for 4 years. And so I'm sure an exaggeration, but kind of just a point to like highlight, I had it pretty well because I was coming in on kind of his coattails with a very different background, a little bit more of a formalized background from coming from a collegiate sports setting versus a like gen pop gym setting. Now, nothing against gen pop gym setting. I worked gen pop gym setting, even when I was working in collegiates, because I really enjoy working with Gen Pop. So it wasn't that hard in that sense. I think people were really receptive, but I did have probably a handful of people. I remember this one interaction. Uh, former collegiate athlete who's now a firefighter, and he came up to me and he said, I don't know what it is about me or my coaches, but I have a really hard time listening to coaches. And I was like, okay, this is like every coach that you've had or just like a couple? And he's like, I don't know, it's just like every coach. And I'm like, that's not a coaching problem, that's probably a you problem. And that in front of a crew. And so till this day, there's this one captain who he's like, that was my first his first experience of me interacting with somebody, like first time he'd met me or whatever. And he was like, oh, that's when I knew like you'd be okay. Like your ability to, have people skills essentially, and also be knowledgeable, those sorts of things. Just like those were the things I already knew about Tristan before he'd even come in and, worked with a crew, because I did all that back checking up front. So all that stuff needs to exist already. But can you do all that and have people skills? I think is like that's where you win people over. And so in that sense, it wasn't as challenging as other people who have it in the fire service.
I have like a two-part question here. What was one of the first things that you tried to do and
Mm.
implement that you were told no on? And like how strict was it? And was there something eventually too that you fought tooth and nail for that was a previous no and eventually like got turned around and has become a success?
Oh, trying to think of anything that I tried implementing where they immediately said no. When I first started, n nothing I suggested was turned down.
That's
And
pretty awesome.
so, yeah, I think it's all it is awesome. And I think it speaks to kind of like the way our leadership, like I'm grateful that they trusted me the way they did in that. And I think it's also part of like I chose to bring things about in a strategic way and not be like, hey, you know we're going to build 9 gyms and deck them out with every piece of equipment we've ever had. Like, no, that I would just slowly start to build in terms of the kind of equipment we needed, the kind of training I would present them with. um, and so I wish I had a way cooler answer that came to like a nice full circle story for you, Tristan, but I don't, in the sense that pretty like I can't think of a specific example of where I was outwardly told no.
When you had this conversation with somebody where they talk about like they broke a lot of people, and
Mm-hmm.
one that like goes into your people skills of actually being able to have that conversation and listening to that conversation. Like I know so many coaches, especially in the football world, where they'll hear that conversation, they will change nothing about the program and they will go and then go break people, like because it's their philosophy of what they want to do. It's the harder way, you know what I mean? And I've definitely fallen into that trap as a young strength coach, like when I was first starting out. What did you like? How did you look at it in a way of like, okay, what's my principles with these firefighters, with these clients, with these athletes? Like, well, what am I looking to accomplish with them? Is it to make them feel good? Is it to make them perform better? Like what were the holistic principles that you built your program off of for these 10 years? And I'm sure they've evolved since then, but where you had that conversation, you listened and you're like, okay, like this is what I need to do with these people in front of me.
So I approached it as if I was working with Gen Pop, to be honest. So, like I said, I came from like previous to this, I was in collegiate athletics, but way previous to that, I was personal training and coaching group fitness classes and things like that. And so, I've done a lot of work in like essentially a CrossFit style setting where you have a multitude of skills, a multitude of athletic abilities, and a an even larger variety of desire. Because at least if you work in a gym, people have paid to be there. Whereas like, when people show up to work at the fire service, they didn't pay for you to come and show up. Similar to like collegiate athletics, right? Or if you're assigned to some kind of team, high school, whatever it may be, like you just happen to be there and they may or may not want to work with you. And so my principles were, okay, from a general population standpoint, what would I do with them? The entire goal of why this program was built is for health reasons. So the whole reason that my position and positions similar to mine were even funded 10 years ago was because the number one killer of firefighters were heart attacks. And the vast majority of those people who were suffering from heart attacks had like cardiovascular disease and were obese. And so that's like the bottom line. Now it's definitely evolved since then, but that was the bottom line of like, okay, I need to come in here and help these people get healthier. And kind of like you said earlier, that these firefighters, they're real people. They have families, they have like they're coaching little league and they're helping their kids with homework at night. And then they probably also have a side job. And so this wasn't their main thing, which might sound crazy to coaches who like haven't worked in the tactical setting before. You're like, oh, well, like that's part of their job. It's so important. It's a physical, occupation. Like, yes. And they are still human beings like everybody else who they don't necessarily love the gym. And like, it's similar to like athletes that you've worked with that don't love coming to the weight room. Like, yeah, they'll go, run routes all day, but they might not want to come into the weight room or, pick sport here. But same idea. So principle was general physicality and teaching them how to move so they don't get hurt from moving. And so can I improve their conditioning in some way, shape, or form? And which I'm still, and maybe Tristan can either check me on it or vouch for me, and that like I am still very adamant about teaching people how to move well. And that if you know how to move well, I am less worried about you getting to do these things out in the wild, right? When the job demands it, if you've never gotten down on one knee and felt stable, like the first time you do it is on the job, you're likely going to get hurt. If I can teach you in our controlled environment, which is all that strength and conditioning is, teaching your body how to do things in a very controlled environment, then you can go off and do whatever. So really, how can I get them slightly healthier and how can I get them to move well?
That's dope. That's dope. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like practically? Like maybe now or maybe then. I'm sure it's evolved now that you have 10 years of experience with a lot of these people. Like, is it like implementing a lot of like variability in their movement? Like, how are you practicing them getting on one knee and getting back up? Like, how are you improving their cardiovascular health? How are you implementing these things with maybe people that don't want to do it? Like, also, and another question on this too is like, is it mandatory for them to train with you guys or is it optional? Like, what's that process like and how are you practically implementing some of these things with these people?
Tristan, what's that process like?
It is different day to day. There's an academy with cadets that we have them 4 or 5 days a week where we get at least an hour, and that is they see us every day, and we have basically forced training, which is pretty cool for around 7 months. But with firefighters who actually have the job, incumbent firefighters, it can be as little as once every few weeks we see them and get to work out with them. Some of them like to do it a little bit more and will be a little more receptive and reach out to you. But generally, at least once or twice a month, it's very highly encouraged. We'll make rounds and go see them and help run them through workouts and the educational pieces. But at the end of the day, they don't have to do it, but I'd say 95+% do want to do it and seem to get benefit from it.
Oh, that highlights something because technically they do have to do it. And that like when we make rounds to stations, it is now, are there occasions where people aren't hopping in? Absolutely. And also depends on like, who are we talking about? Is this person on the back half of a 48? So have they already worked an entire day and now they're working a second day? Are they, needing to restock the ambulance because they just got back from a call or something along those lines? And maybe that, and I don't know, Tristan, this is something you need to tell me, but when I first started, I would have definitely a higher frequency of people who did not hop in. And that probably, and I couldn't give you a percentage, I'd be like pulling it out of my ass if I gave you one, but I definitely had like 5 to 10 people who, like, if I made it around, they were going to the bathroom for 45 minutes when I showed up, kind of thing. Now that doesn't happen, not without like an actual reason to be in the bathroom for 45 minutes. Is I'm like, you should probably go home anyways because you're shitting your brains out or something. But they are required to be there when we do see them, but that is the thing. And that now we only see people who are on shift about once every 3 weeks. When I first started, which is, I mean, we've changed so much since then, or grown so much. It was only 75 people. So it was like working with a single team. And I essentially ran 4 groups a day. And that I would go around from station to station and work out and see everybody every single week. And as we've grown and evolved and things have changed, that starts to look a little different. And so we
And how
do
many people do you
see
guys have now?
about 220.
Oh, damn. So it's like tripled.
Yeah. So about 220 and then another 20 sitting in academy. But in terms of what style training it looks like, those are kind of your two major settings, in like academy setting, and then we'll just call them firefighters for lack of, like, the people who are on shift and doing the job. In the academy setting, it is very structured. It is a lot more regimented. You can follow a standard kind of progression as if you would any other team or group that you're working with over the course of 6 months, because you see them regularly. You get to see their training. With firefighters, because we see them so infrequently, and now I would like to say this isn't the case, but it could be the case, and that the last time somebody worked out was through the 3 weeks before, when Tristan or I saw them. Now, again, I'd like to say that isn't the case, and in most cases it's not. People work out roughly around a minimum of like 2 times a week, but the majority of our department works out 4 or more times a week, according to their self-reported data. So, there's a little bias in there. But it is more educational based training now when we make rounds with them, if we're seeing them in person. Now, we do have programs that we write that are more progressive, and depending on what we're looking at specifically, like, oh, we have somebody who needs to get stronger. Obviously we have like some strength biases, and like we're going to spend a lot of time doing like your basic lifts. And then, like, I mean, Tristan, why don't you tell them about the program we were just writing today for long?
Yeah, so someone has came with, they just ran like that 5-3-1 program and they got a lot stronger. They made it all the way through, but they said they were moving a little bit stiff and more so like a board after. And they've also had a history of just some shoulder injuries and shoulder problems. So just kind of creating a 10-week type program in TeamBuilder that's going to address basically full body movement patterns and full body strength, with a bias towards getting some low level plyos into some higher level plyos throughout, and just moving the shoulder through a bunch of different planes of movement, and just starting at very, very basic movements with the shoulder, getting it going through every range. And I think, as you always say, Austin, treating the shoulder like it is actually a shoulder, and rotating it, pushing it, pulling it, pressing it, doing all these different motions, and then just progressing each one. And then that's something that's individualized for one, but is going to be available for everyone to hop on at the station. So all the firefighters, they have TeamBuilder available to them, and there's a plethora of programs in there that they can download. There's the videos, they can record all their stuff.
That's super sweet. So you guys have the hybrid option with these athletes, even if you're not seeing them every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of them take advantage of that. And then others we serve more as just like a checkpoint of like they're doing their own training. And especially with Tristan coming on, we like took the idea of like essentially mini workshops every time that we make our rounds out to stations. What can we introduce them to that, either A, we see like, hey, this is something in training you've likely never even thought of. And even if you have thought of it, you didn't know how to implement, or, this is something that we think of that goes into these training plans. So maybe it's a good idea to follow a structured training plan, because we do have a lot of people who either A, follow no plan whatsoever, which depending on where they're at in their like, fitness, strength conditioning journey is cool. Like, you're somebody who doesn't work out, I don't care what you do. Like, go do Zumba or whatever. Like, I literally don't care. I want you to move your body. And then obviously as we like progress in that journey, we can get a little more intentional. And so Like we've introduced them to like isometrics, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know what these were, or I saw them online and didn't know how to implement them. We've introduced them to like some low level plyos, some odd objects, some like how do we move the spine in different ways. So they're more like mini workshop styles now versus 10 years ago. I just essentially ran, 12 groups a week and put them all. I actually had them all in the exact same training program. And the reason for that was because I needed everybody to learn how to move. Like we could, adjust reps and sets and things like that and weight, obviously, but like I just needed everybody to work through basic movement pattern progressions. And then obviously onesies and twosies, we'd either progress up or regress down depending on their needs. And I ran it like that for a year. I had them all in the same training program for a year because I was like, I just need y'all to move. Once they learned how to move, then I built out, and this is probably the longest running kind of style training that I did was I had one blueprint and I broke them up like the blueprint of being really movement pattern based as well as energy system based. And then you kind of plugged and chugged in there based on your goal. So it was, I ate at Panera a lot at the time. And so I called it a you pick two, and that like there were two strength options and there were two conditioning options. So there was like this idea of like strength and power. So what we would probably consider more traditional strength and conditioning. There was like a movement and mobility option, which in their heads meant like, oh, it's not as hard, but really it just meant like dumbbells and I'm going to try and increase your range of motion a little bit more. And it's not a barbell, so they didn't think of it as strength work. And then our conditioning options, we had one that would be a little bit more like interval based on either I'm running, rowing, biking, something like that, or one that was more circuit based for like my CrossFit junkies who always wanted to like feel like they were going hard or going home. And so you would pick one or one strength component, one conditioning component, and you could like the way I wrote it, which took way too much time, but you could mix and match those as much as you wanted, essentially based on the day, because they all like people, especially people who chose a job for its like ability to be different every single day, also want like to make selections that feel like things are changing, which can be difficult because then they just program hop day to day. But yeah, now I'm thinking like that was actually a pretty awesome program that I ran for years.
I was gonna say, and giving them the ownership of just like I've noticed that
Mm-hmm.
so many times with my most difficult athletes. It's like it's kind of like tricking them into ownership. It's like we're basically doing a squat, but like you get to pick from one of
Oh,
these
absolutely.
squats, and they when they get the pick, they're like, yeah, I'll go do this one, and then they give full intent to it because you gave them like a little piece of candy of like you got to
Mm-hmm.
pick that rather than me telling you to go do it, and like the psychological shift in those athletes, it's pretty crazy to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things I'm interested in, because Tristan's brought this up a bunch on the podcast, is a lot of your guys is testing and like evaluating the firefighters. What
Mm-hmm.
is that process like? Because Tristan, like, it sounds like you guys do a lot of like really cool stuff there, and I feel like a lot of it's really important for budget, like showing not only to the firefighters themselves that like, hey, this stuff is working, this stuff matters, this is where we need to improve, but also like the higher ups and people be like, hey, my job is worth it. In the same way, like the collegiate sector was like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm worth it to pay, like, don't get rid of me type thing. You know what I mean? Like, and showing them like we have numerical values to this stuff. We provide value, we prevent injuries, we increase cardiovascular like outputs. Like, what is that process like? Is that something new to like in the 10 years? Have you been doing that the entire time? Do you have 10 years of data points with this stuff? Like, what's that process like?
I do. I have 10 years of data points,
That's super
so
cool.
many Excel spreadsheets. So when I showed up, our fire chief now, so in charge of the fire department, he was my immediate supervisor at the time. So he was in charge of training. And when I showed up, he said something that I want to do is I want to implement quarterly testing. So every 3 months, we are doing something with the idea that they used to do something once a year, but they would see the kind of the standard trend of like, oh, the fitness thing is coming up. So I'm going to start training for it. And of course, they like follow, try and get 6 months of training in 4 weeks. And then they end up hurt. And still not in great shape. And so you see that, like, they would see that cycle. And so with every three, with something happening every 3 months, it's not long enough for somebody to like get entirely out of shape. Is kind of the idea. It's like, hey, it's a reminder of a checkpoint of something that's important, as well as each of our tests do something a little different. And some of them are required in that, like, excuse me, there's one that we do, we call the pack walk test. It's essentially a 45-pound vest, and they have to walk. They're not allowed to run 3 miles in 45 minutes. And so, like, that's one that we do that's required based on the National Wildland. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get this wrong. Anyways, the wildland firefighter, like, coordinating group, that's their test. We didn't come up with that. That's just the one that they use. And if they want to, like, if our firefighters want to be deployable, they have to do that test. And so we pull that in and use that there. And then there's other ones that, again, they're outlined kind of in the protocols of the fire service or the recommendations of the fire service. We just put our own spin and our own flavor on them. But we have 10 years of data, which is awesome and also exhausting.
And what's the turnover rate with, like, since you've been there in 10 years? Like, is it you're working with the same kind of people for 10 years, or is it like they're kind of in and out?
So we've grown a whole lot. So definitely, I mean, we started with 75. All 75 of those are not here anymore. I would say, based from those 75, I think we I just ran like a big, essentially review of the data. And I think it was somewhere around 35 or 40 of those original 75 are still here. And then everybody else
For
is
10 for the 10
new.
years.
Correct.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then everybody else is new at that point. And honestly, it depends on when they were hired to do, to a degree of like how many people have turned over, left for other departments, gotten out of the fire service, on and so forth.
And what's the, like, coming from the collegiate sector where it's like a 4-year turnover rate and it's
Hmm.
100% in 4 years? How does that change your programming? How does that change your, like, thought
Hmm.
process when you get to work with somebody for 10 years? Like, that's got to be pretty cool.
So in theory, we get to work with them for, 25 to
Yeah,
30.
longer even.
And
Yeah.
that, yeah, the intention is that, people come in and now they don't have a choice, but like they are force fed strength and conditioning to a degree from the academy standpoint. It's like they're going through, like, the fire world's kindergarten, knowing that like fitness, health, strength and conditioning is important. And so then the goal is for the next 20 to 30 years, depending on how long they want to work, then they're doing something. It's very different from a collegiate setting in the sense that I am so grateful that I did so much work with Gen Pop before I went into the fire service. Because if I had only approached the fire service like I did collegiate athletics, and I think also collegiate athletics has maybe morphed a little bit since I've gotten out of it, but it was like we're essentially going to squeeze the performance out of you in for 4 years to a degree where it's like now I think maybe health is, mentioned a little bit more, and like, just general joint health and having and collegiate athletes mental health be a part of the conversation, which 10 years ago really wasn't nearly as much. We're dealing with, I call them high stakes Gen Pop, because they come in with the background for most of them of the general population. We have very high highs, we have very low lows, we have varying interest levels and like random injury rates. We have people people show up at the academy literally never having trained in their life before. And we have people who like, oh yeah, I've been competing in whatever since I was 5 years old. And so you have to take the lessons of working with such a varied population for the extension of their entire life with the goal of health in mind. And the high stakes comes in, which is where I'm grateful for like my collegiate background of, hey, their performance does matter. So once we get to that point where we're not just like, hey, exercise is good, we should do it, but now we can put some intentionality behind it. I can be efficient. It's more about being efficient than it is about pushing the most performance out of them at that standpoint.
With those long time horizons, what's the longest it's taken to get somebody to like buy into you or like or like actually believe in what you're doing? Is it, I mean, if you have been working for almost 10 years, I have to imagine there's been someone who was pretty hesitant for multiple years and then finally came around. Like, what's your longest story and how did that end up
I'm
actually getting turned around?
I've had people actually not be hesitant. Well, hesitant in the sense that they enjoy working out, and they appreciate and listen and learn, but maybe don't implement fully. They're gonna like, I'm gonna cherry pick what I like to hear and use that, but I'm not gonna listen to the whole message. I just got a conversation or just got a text message yesterday, from somebody who I have worked with since I have been here. So for 10 years, I have been talking about how like you cannot just go into the gym and crush yourself every single day. Like you can't do it. You think you can, but you can't, in the sense that you're going to go in and at some point you're going to reach a point of diminishing returns, and it's going to happen pretty quickly. And ebbs and flows of like career and physicality in terms of like they're yoked, they're into, just like the everything that people go through of their cycles. And now it's like, oh, I'm at a point where I care not only about like, yeah, I want to be able to lift weights kind of, and also, but I know I need to be conditioned because physicals are coming up. And now my testosterone is low, and I've just been crushing myself at the gym all day. And so I'm like, oh, it almost sounds like you need to put some methodology behind your training, and how crushing your nervous system with a job that crushes your nervous system isn't great. And so I literally, he finally hopped on board literally like 2 weeks ago. And I just got a text
10
from
years
him to
in.
10 years in, got a text from him. And he's not somebody who like was like, against the idea. Like he's somebody who's worked out regularly and like trained aggressively, just more so the actual buy-in of the whole message versus I just like these little bits. Yeah, I got a text message from him yesterday. He's like, I am feeling so much better. Like I didn't know that you didn't have to feel like crap all the time, and that you could still get better. And I was like, that's actually the entire goal. It's what I've been telling you for 10 years, but thank you. Thank you for that.
That's a long Harvard class
Yeah.
right there. 10 years of that. Uh, One of the things I do, because you've mentioned it a couple times on the podcast, Tristan's mentioned it before, but the difference in a room where you're gonna have, let's say, maybe like an ex Division One athlete coming to be a
Mhm.
firefighter versus somebody that's never trained before. How do you work as a coach like that, especially when you were training the sessions like every single day? Like, how do you make those
Mhm.
adjustments? What do you do? Do you just spend more time with the novice and like kind of let the D1 guy run the program? Like, how do you balance that where like somebody doesn't feel like they're slighted or like being left out on because either they're too talented or they have no idea what they're doing?
Yeah. So, especially when I started now, I mean, even more, even I think the same now, something that I like to do is never show, I start with the most regressed version that is like generally acceptable, in that, like, we'll take push-ups, for example. Like everybody can do it now. In theory, everybody can do push-ups on their knees when we are on shift, right? So I start everybody from that point, and I might, out of, if we see 70 people over the course of a day, we might have one or two who we eventually need to progress down to their or regress down to their knees, right? But if we're talking push-ups, cool. Everybody in our warm-up, we're going to start with some push-up variation. We might then introduce like some plyo push-ups that people can choose to progress to if they need to, or like if they want to, if they can. And so you can do, I mean, we do the same thing in terms of like squatting. All right, we're like we work with our warm-ups and we see who can even do a general air squat or a goblet squat, see what we're working with. Well, if we're going to front squat that day, maybe we do a bilateral, dumbbell front squat. And then we say, okay, you can either stay here, or if you want to grab a barbell, here are your options, your variations. And we want you to choose a weight that kind of feels like you've got two or three left in the tank. And so giving a lot of, I want to use the word autonomy, and I don't know if that's the one I'm thinking of. But giving people the choice of like, oh, I can choose to progress. The people who want to do it will go for it. And the people who also have the ability to do it will go for it. And it won't leave those who feel or aren't as physical like crap because they always have to be shown the regressed version. And then when you're working on that in a room, it's no different than if you've ever ran really a large group in general. You don't necessarily spend more time with a novice than you do the advanced person. Maybe if like there's only one advanced and the majority of them are, at the same level, then you leave that person a little bit alone more. Well, I promise I can speak English, but um, giving people appropriate things to do allows you to spend the same amount of time with everybody.
Yeah,
And
that's awesome.
so, yeah, like I don't think it's, oh, they're a beginner, so you need to spend more time on them because like we only see people once every 3 weeks. And so our goal is to share as much time with everybody as we can. If we can make sure that we coach a group through a progression that makes sense, everybody can choose the progression that's appropriate for them. And therefore, I'm not constantly worried about if they're doing something right. I feel like, Tristan, we've had a lot of conversations lately about what I call like lazy coaching, which this isn't a bad thing. It's like I choose lazy coaching. And what that means is I put constraints on the people that I work with to force them to do what it is my goal is for them to do. They just get to kind of choose how that's done in a way, and it's pretty effective.
Dude, that's an awesome terminology. Way to put
Yeah.
it. That's exactly how I'd frame. And I think to me at least, it's like that's the best way to do it. It gives
Yeah.
them autonomy to be able to like feel like they're making the choices, but also it's like to me, it's like a movement education process. And I think so many
Hmm.
coaches like they hold their athletes' hands so much that like the athlete never learns. They never learn how to
Yeah.
auto-regulate. They never learn when they need to progress or regress. And again, that doesn't mean you never say anything. Like, because that was I was gonna have that question too, is like, do you feel like you have to progress or regress your athletes more? Because like when I work with a group of high school boys, it's a constant regress. I'm
Yeah,
like, you
sure.
dumbasses, like you can't load up 200 pounds on the bench when you've never benched 135. Like it's constantly yelling them at the regress. And then let's say I'm working with like a collegiate soccer group of girls. It's like constant, like you just moved that like it was nothing. Like let's add some weight there and like progress that way. And I feel like trying to find that balance, but I feel like never having those conversations with coaches where it's like all just laid out on a program. It's this percentage at this time, it's this warm up at this time, it's this movement
Mm-hmm.
this way. And it's like so many of these athletes that come to me from those systems, everything they do, and they look at me and it's like, did I do that right?
Hmm.
It's like, I don't know. Did you? Like, what was that? How did it feel? What, you know what I mean? And it's just like, especially when you're working with somebody for 10 years, like that's an even, and that's one thing I love about switching to the private sector is that I do get to spend a little bit more time with these athletes, a little bit longer time, even when they graduate. A lot of times they'll come and train with us. And you get to see that. You get to see them like start to own their movement and start to be like, yes, this is what I do. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to take it. This is where I need to pull back. And it's like that to me, that's the point. That's the point of
Yep.
being a good coach is to let them kind of coach themselves and then be the guardrail when they need a guardrail.
Yeah, I always say that like the whole point of my job is to work myself out of a job.
Mm.
And that
Yeah.
like in if we do our job well in this model, like Tristan and I are out of work. Now, we're not actually because the goal is that like everybody they just start asking, and I don't mean the word better like in a negative way that whatever they were doing was worse. They start asking more nuanced questions. And that it's like, I don't know, some video game where they're like constantly leveling up. And so cool, we like you should own that level. If I can teach you to own level one and you never have to ask me a question about level one, cool. Then we move into level two and so on and so forth. We start asking better questions. But the thing about the fire service is that like and Tristan, I'd be interested to hear your take because you have fresher eyes on the department than I do. Like it's less like whole population based the way you were talking about like your high school boys. I could see how like okay, yeah, you got to reel them back quite a bit when bench press comes out. That's they they're little high school boys. When like RDL day rolls out, I'm like, let's add the weight. Like what is happening right now? And then obviously there's onesies and twosies. Like some crews are way more like aggressive in nature that like there's quite a few people where I'm like, hey, like that person's been like playing rec ball for the last 10 years and you haven't done a skip in about 15. So like rail it on back, and then vice versa. There's like a whole group of people who like are go-getters, and one person who hasn't like they need to step it up and they have the capability of it. And just like you said, it's being guardrails to them, but it's like it's so varied just because our population. I mean, we have everything from like a fresh 18-year-old to a 60-year-old, and like every desire of wanting to train, not train, having trained for 60 years or having trained for one. So
Yeah,
Yeah, Tristan,
there's
what's that experience been like going from pit to that?
it's actually been, I mean, it's pretty similar because some people, I mean, you work with athletes, some people don't like the weight room, and I think the thing that holds true is people don't like to feel dumb. And so if
mhm.
they don't know how to do something or they're not confident in doing something, they generally like to like shirk to the sides, be in the shadows, and just not ask the question. And especially in this population, it's even more true. So it's not necessarily that
Yep.
people are adverse to any of the workouts you do, but they just might be like, wow, we have this implement that I've seen in the corner. I don't really know how to use it. I don't want to ask someone else because then they'll know I don't know how to use it. So guess what I'm just not going to do? I'm just not going to use this or not going to do X. And so when we do these things where we come around, we just teach them things and they're like, "Oh, this has been very useful to me. I've like really been using this now and I'm implementing it into my own workout." And once it spreads like wildfire. Once one person
Mhm.
does something that you said and it all of a sudden feels good and it worked for them, they're like, yeah, yeah, you got to talk to Vanessa, like you got to talk to Tristan. They helped me able to accomplish a pull-up and I've been trying for 5 years and I wasn't able to do it. And it was like we just showed you three little regressions that you did on your own. Like you still did that. It's just you weren't trying these things before because you didn't know about them.
Yeah, dude, that's a really good way to put it too. Because I like relating it. My mom's an accountant, and I like relating
Mm,
like fitness for most people is like taxes, like for us. You know what I mean? For
mm.
fitness people, like me doing
Yeah.
taxes, dude, you'll never see a more angry version of myself. Like me trying to like calculate it, like get all my numbers. I'm like, oh my God, I hate every second of
Mhm.
this. I avoid it for so long. Like I push it off for so long, and I'm like, oh my God, this is what most people are like with fitness. It's just something that they're not used to. It's like a cost up front that they have to do. They're unsure with all of this stuff. There's like a little bit like, oh, I'm not really sure if I'm doing this right, that type of thing. And I was like, man, that's the same. And then my mom, she hates fitness. Trying to get her to work out is like pulling teeth. You give her a number sheet and she geeks out. She's like, yeah, I love doing this. And I'm like, man, that's like kind of the same thing. But us as fitness professionals, a lot of times we don't realize that. We don't realize we're the accountant with numbers. It's just with us with weights. And it's like, why don't you know this? Or why aren't you like picking up on this? Or why don't this like, well, you spent your entire life being an expert on this, whether it's because you're a coach or an athlete, like, you know what I mean? But like, they're the same thing. Like, you spent so long in this specific setting, you're super comfortable there, you're super confident there, and you take yourself out of that setting and put yourself in a setting that a novice lifter has to go into. And it's the same thing. You're frustrated, you're unsure, you're unconfident, and it's just a skills thing that you gain through reps.
Something that I told Tristan when he first showed up, and it's probably something that I don't think has changed in the last 10 years, but has gotten louder for me, is that our job is to give people a positive experience with training, because the default is that people don't train. And if like, anybody comes in here and is, I don't know, somebody loves some form, I can't even, like if somebody is always like, I am always going to do fasted cardio in the morning because it is the best way for me to get my training in. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like you could automatically step in and be like, okay, well, actually, if you ate some carbs and then like went and trained, you'd actually perform better. But instead of starting there, I go, okay, why is that? Well, I train at 4:35 in the morning so that way I can get done by the time I need to go to shift or by the time my kids wake up or whatever it is. And like I hate applesauce pouches. I hate juice. I only like water, and I don't know. It's just like everything under the sun that would be a reason as to why they can't eat. It's like, okay, cool. This is going to be a multi like discussion thing of maybe someday I'll get you to eat something before that, but I'm never going to tell you that that's dumb. I'm always going to be like, cool, I love that you're training first thing in the morning. Like, just make sure you maybe shorten it if you didn't get much sleep or whatever, you can adjust that. And so, like Tristan said, people don't like to feel dumb, and they shouldn't because they're not dumb. There's something that all of us are absolute idiots at. And so, if we can give somebody, and when you want to learn that, you don't want to learn from somebody who's telling you all the things you're doing wrong. Like, if I don't know how to do my taxes and I go to an accountant and they're just telling you, well, you sucked at this, you sucked at that, you didn't keep this. Like, it's one thing if maybe my mom's my accountant and she gets to talk to me like that, right? But if I go and pay somebody, or like it's a service offered to me, which is what Tristan and I are to the fire department, right? A service offered to them. Like, I don't want to listen to all the things I'm doing wrong. So like, let's give them a positive experience and just build trust like normal people. Everything's coming back to these people skills that we started this conversation with, of like, cool, we can just keep going from there, because if the default is that people don't train at all, literally anything is better than nothing in that sense. There's definitely some nuance of like, we could spend our time more wisely, and so you can have those conversations with that intent, but don't just outright be like, no.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing I want to take this, and maybe we close around this topic, but Tristan, you're the first person in this role, correct? Or has this role been a thing before?
As like the secondary assistant,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So Vanessa, what has that experience been like of like handing some of the responsibilities off as the person that's been in charge for so long, and like being the boss of somebody and being in charge of somebody, and like being able to like trust somebody with maybe something that's been your baby for 10 years, something you've built up for 10 years, and like being okay with that. What has been the process like? In I'm sure you've had learning
Um,
like things there, and I'm sure you've had interns before in the college setting and stuff like that, but
mhm.
what has that process been like?
Yeah, yeah, like you said, it is very different from like, when I had GAs and interns and things like that, because like this is my baby. It's like, oh, nobody cares as much as I do, which I don't think is true, but that's how we all feel about something that we've grown, that we've worked with for so long. It's been it's been awesome, and it's been awesome and also interesting in the reflection of like, that pause wasn't for you, that pause is for me, because I'm trying to reflect on like, the biggest thing that I've learned is things that I say all the time, but that like people don't live in my head, and that like Tristan can't read my mind. And that I need to, if I'm thinking of something, I'm like, oh, I should probably explain what I mean by that. As well as, it's one of those things where it's like, I learned to, because I am around him more, I'm like, cool, I do trust those skills. I trust these skills. As like he does more and more, I'm like, cool, I'm going to start, giving you more and more free reign. Um, just like I was telling somebody yesterday, a contractor, for like a company who kind of offers like health, fitness, strength conditioning to public entities, came in and was like wanting to like talk about hosting a workshop. And I like I was like, I need to go to one of your workshops, because I am protective over these people and their time and their attention, because they give so much out to their communities that like, if we're going to ask for their attention back, it better be worth the damn. And so that is why the process that Tristan went through to even like almost get hired was so much, because I was like, I can't just have anybody walking in here. And so it has been awesome in the sense that I, I have more help, and these firefighters have somebody else that isn't me, which is great, because not everybody is going to relate to me. Like, people need other people, and it's nothing against me or nothing against that firefighter or nothing against, just like, some people will gravitate towards what you say, Austin, more than what I say, and some people will gravitate towards what I say more than Tristan, or vice versa. Like, it's just having more people to spread the message of like, as a firefighter, your health and performance are important, is outstanding, and Tristan's awesome, so it's been even better.
And what have you guys have? Because Tristan's made it sound like it's been super smooth. So how did you guys have
Oh,
any growing pains with the programs, or any like thought process like that right away? Was it all smooth right away? I'm just like, for people that are like, again, we have a lot of like private sector coaches, and they always like
mm-hmm.
talk about getting an intern, or talking about like, again, in the private sector, again, it's a similar situation where it is your baby, and you're like, oh, how do I do this, or how do I do like, how do I like work with the growing pain? How do I keep with like what I believe in, with like, this is, I hired this person, I believe in like that they have a skill set to do it, like how do I give them some free reign there? Like, how did you guys handle that? Like, I would be super interested to hear that.
Tristan, I want to hear like what your perspective is on this, because you're like super smooth. It has been smooth, but I think it's also been super informal. So I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
I'd say it's been pretty informal, but it's the way I saw it, like at a very top-down level, was most of the people and most of the firefighters saw another person being brought on more full-time as an investment in them. So like I think it was an easy reception because it wasn't like, hey, you're coming in as like a drill instructor or something, or because something's wrong. It's this person's coming in because we've grown and we want to have continued investment and like we want to try to continue to deliver a quality product to you. So it's pretty smooth. And I think she kind of took my initial strengths right away is that we had like a conditioning group and it was literally week 2. I think it was like my 5th day in. And it was like, hey, this is like a 16-person group. They're 5 weeks into a 12-week thing, finish out their last 7 weeks, like program it and bring them up and like teach them everything you can in this last 7 weeks. And so like that was the first thing. And then hopping into it was just small bits and pieces. So hopping into that, and that was pretty low stakes because it was 3, 4 people at a time, 45 minutes at a time, which was pretty simple. And then I think once that I had done that decently well, it was, hey, well, we have this group of 12 that you're going to see for an hour once or twice a week. Like now, can you work with them? And then it was working with them seemed good. All right, well, now we have cadets, which is now like 25 instead of this. Can you work with them and just continually doing small improvements as you got up of like, hey, this is going to be easy for you because yeah, coming into a group of firefighters that's 40 people deep for like your first day might not set you up for success.
Yeah.
So getting 3 or 4 of them at a time was probably the best and just slowly moving up as you got to know people and they got to learn your competence because they don't want to just trust someone blindly because they've had some maybe negative experiences in the past.
Yeah, I think what probably helped too, and was exactly what you said, in that you got to it's almost like they got to test you out as well, in the sense that I always tell the firefighters, I'm like, y'all are worse than like the sorority like women that I lived with in college in terms of like how quick y'all spread that rumor mill or like gossip spreads is so fast. So yeah, he's only working with 3 or 4 people at a time. He's only working with 16 out of the 220-ish people, but very quickly word gets around of like, hey, how's that new guy, how's that new guy. And if you're a good coach who can carry on a conversation, like, one, let's pretend like you're knowledgeable already, right? And even if you're not, you admit to that of, I don't know X or Y, which I have told firefighters, I don't know X or Y. um, it's how well can you carry on a conversation and be a human being that's like trying to help another human being. And so they essentially, like, he passed the vibe check for people. And so they go on and spread that. And then, now when he goes around to, all of the stations in a day, they've had that slow build up of like, okay, we know what to expect. We know that like he's good people, versus like him showing up first thing, trying to interact with an entire shift on a single day. And they're like, we don't know who the F you are. Like, we're going to be overtly courteous and like not say anything actually because we don't know if you're going to report us to HR or not, or something like that.
Tristan, you got in the cult, dude. Let's go.
Yeah, and I think one of the things was providing value, but it's like seems cheesy, but being somebody, especially with like a group who was in like the conditioning group, provided like being somebody that like they didn't want to disappoint or something. Like I went and saw
Mm-hmm.
some of the like, final tests that they had to like finish off this group, and they're like, yeah, when you showed up to the testing, it made me like push that a little bit more because like I didn't want you to feel like all the work you did with us was wasted. I was like, as soon as somebody says that, they're probably on the right path. And you've seen it before, like when I've showed up, I've seen it before when I showed up to stations and someone will like hit the other guy in the head, be like, that's not what Vanessa has taught us. Like, come on, like lock in here. And so like when you see things like that, that's how you know that it's actually working and they have a decent amount of respect for you and like care what you have to say.
That's the whole goal, is like if you can be almost like and I'm sure you guys have all had it said, and that like, oh yeah, I was like going to pick up a weight, and then I like all I thought about was like whatever coaching cue you gave them for that thing, and it's like you're living in the back of their brain about like do a workout and eat a vegetable, and you're like, hell yeah, fucking did it. Yeah,
Sometimes it
like we
takes
have
10
people
years for that program to download.
sometimes it takes 10 years, but we play the long game here. So
That's awesome. Last question of the podcast for both of you. what's the like future of it look like? Have you guys had any cool like emergent ideas of like both of you guys talking about this stuff? And Vanessa, I'm sure it's awesome to like have somebody to like have a
Oh my
conversation about like
gosh,
how this
it is
builds and
so
like
great.
yeah, like that's got to be so nice. Like what's the future look like? Anything big coming up? Any like just new ideas? Maybe it's small tweaks in the program, maybe it's big things that you guys want to do.
What do we got, Tristan?
Well, they're doing a big shift change, not to get into the weeds, but they're changing how their shifts go for the first time in like 20 years in around 6 weeks.
Ever, literally
Yeah.
ever.
So in the last however long this has been a fire department, they're doing a huge shift change, and so that's going to be a massive overhaul for how everybody operates. And so
In a good way or bad way? Like better for sleep type thing or just different?
It's
different.
just different. And that right now we work, essentially they work one day on. So they're at work for 24 hours and then they're off for 48 hours. And so now they're going to be at work for 48 hours and then off. So they'll be at work for 2 days and then they're going to be off for 4 days. And so you're still working 2 days over the course of 6 days, but now it's backed up. And so I would say typically, if you are younger, you're like, cool, this is great. I can totally work 2 days straight. I get 4 days off. I have all that time in the world. A concern with like our older population is that like 48 hours at a busy station, like it takes a lot out of you. So talk about some like programming challenges and that not only are we now working with like undulating in general, but now we're talking about like 48 hours where like you come out potentially crushed and maybe slept 3 of those. Who knows? And maybe you slept a total normal amount. It totally differs by station, differs by day, so on and so forth. And so learning to adapt to that is going to be a learning experience on both of our ends, from as like us as coaches, as them as firefighters.
Yeah, that's gotta be crazy. The 48 hours straight, man. How many calls are they normally getting? Like, is there an average? Like, is it just like totally crazy on the
There
day?
is, but it really depends on the station. So like there's one station out by like where Tristan and I are kind of headquartered out of. Like if they get 2 calls in a day, that's a busy day. But then there's other stations where if they get 2 calls, that's like the chillest it's been in like a month and a half. Like if they get 1 call after midnight versus 3 after midnight, then it's a good day.
Oh, that's crazy.
So
That's wild.
Yes.
yeah.
So I think it's gonna be different of like, yeah, how do you program for somebody when they've been awake for potentially, 36 hours, they're really tired. Seeing them, it opens up some other opportunities to hopefully see some other people more and just seeing where it goes. But it's been fun to talk through it and see how it's a huge change is gonna occur in the next 6 weeks.
Yeah. No, this was awesome, guys. This was sweet to hear you guys back and forth, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast, Vanessa and Tristan. I
Awesome.
appreciate you
Thank you
bringing her
so
on. That
much
was
for
awesome.
having me.
Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Jochum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.